Hey, welcome to The Explainer. We're about to dig into a fascinating mystery. It's about a book that's actually quoted in the New Testament, but you probably won't find it in your Bible. And this story, it reveals something really surprising about where the Bible came from and why one very ancient church decided to never, ever let this book go. So let me just ask you this right out of the gate. Do you think all Christian Bibles are identical? I mean, if you were to walk into a church in, say, Rome, and then one in Nashville, and then one in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, would the table of contents in their Bibles all match up? Well, the answer, maybe surprisingly, is a definite no. And the biggest clue to this whole puzzle lies with the Ethiopian Orthodox Church. See, their Bible includes this incredibly ancient, wild, apocalyptic text that most other Christian traditions dropped centuries ago. It's called the Book of Enoch. So, how on earth did that happen? All right, let's dive into the roadmap. First, we're going to talk about why this book was never really lost to begin with. Then we'll step back in time to look at this sort of shared library of texts that existed before the Bible was, well, the Bible. We'll trace the two different paths that led to two very different canons, see how one tradition kept the book while the other let it fade away, and finally, what this incredible story really tells us about sacred texts. Okay, first up, a book that was never lost. We hear this all the time, these stories about the lost books of the Bible. But that label just doesn't fit the Book of Enoch. Because while it definitely disappeared from the Western world, it was alive and kicking somewhere else. And that somewhere else, it was Ethiopia. Get this. For over 1,000 years, while Europe and the Middle East basically forgot this book even existed, the only complete version known to humanity was being carefully preserved in Ethiopia, copied over and over again by scribes in the ancient Ge'ez language. So you see, Ethiopia isn't where the book was found again, it's the place where it was never lost in the first place. So how did we get here? Well, to get it, you've got to travel back with me to a time before the Bible as a single bound book was even a thing. In the early days of Judaism and Christianity, things were a lot more fluid. There wasn't some official, universally agreed upon checklist of sacred books. During what scholars call the Second Temple period, which is, roughly 500 BC to 70 AD, the whole era when Jesus lived, a book like 1 Enoch was wildly popular. Seriously, this was not some obscure text hidden away in a cave. It was a bestseller. It was part of the mainstream conversation for tons of early Jewish and Christian groups, and it deeply shaped how they thought about everything from angels and demons to sin and the end of the world. And if you want cold, hard proof of just how important this book was, look no further than the New Testament itself. Right there in the little book of Jude, the author directly quotes the Book of Enoch. And he doesn't just allude to it, he calls Enoch a prophet and quotes his words as prophecy. That is a huge deal. It's undeniable proof that for the very first Christians, this book carried serious weight. Okay, so if it was so important, what on earth happened? Well, this is where we get to the great fork in the road. It's the moment where two major streams of Christianity started flowing in very different directions, especially when it came to deciding which books were in and which were out. And this right here, this chart, it shows those two journeys perfectly. On one side, you've got Western Christianity. It became much more centralized, much more organized. It was influenced by the books that Rabbinic Judaism ended up keeping. And it started to really obsess over creating a fixed, closed list of books. But then you have the Ethiopian tradition over on the other side, which was developing on its own, far from the influence of Rome. It just held on to a much wider library of ancient sacred texts that were part of its deep Judeo-Christian heritage.
And here's the crucial point, the real game changer. The very idea of what a canon was different. In the West, canon came to mean a closed list, a bouncer at the door. These books are in, everybody else is out, period. But in the Ethiopian tradition, the concept was way more like a rule of faith. It wasn't about a strict list, but about a whole body of sacred literature that together informed the church's beliefs. It's like they weren't just ordering different things off the menu. They had a completely different idea of what a menu was supposed to be.
Now, this fundamental difference in philosophy, it had huge real-world consequences for books like Enoch. It's the reason the book was cherished and preserved in one place and pretty much vanished from another. So, why did the West let Enoch go? Well, it wasn't a single vote or some dramatic event. It was more like a slow fade. Church leaders started getting nervous about its authorship,
I mean, they knew the ancient patriarch Enoch from Genesis didn't actually write it. They also got a bit squeamish about some of its theological ideas, like that really famous story that sin came into the world because of fallen angels. By the 4th century, you had heavy hitters like Augustine and Jerome arguing against it, and eventually, scribes just stopped making new copies. It simply fell out of use.
But in Ethiopia, the exact opposite was happening. The book was never put on a shelf. It was woven right into the very fabric of the church. It was read out loud during services, its ideas about angels and the Messiah shaped their theology, and it became a vital part of the community's spiritual life. And because it was always constantly being used, it was always constantly being preserved. Simple as that.
All right, let's zoom out and look at the big picture here. Why does this story, this one ancient book, in this one specific Bible, why does it even matter to us today? It matters because this story completely shatters the idea that the Bible is some kind of static monolith that just dropped out of the sky fully formed. It's not. The biblical canon is a product of human history. It was shaped by centuries of debate, by different theological priorities, and by the unique paths that different communities took in very different parts of the world. The Ethiopian Bible isn't a mistake. It's a powerful testament to a different and equally valid historical journey. And that leaves us with some really deep questions to chew on, doesn't it? Is the creation of a biblical canon a purely historical event? Is it a purely spiritual one? Or is it somehow both? And what is it really that gives a book its authority? Is it how old it is? Is it a stamp of approval from a church council? Or is it the simple fact that a community of faith has held it sacred and used it for thousands of years?
These are massive questions, and really, they all point to one thing: authority. Who actually got to decide? Who had the power to make the final call on what went into the Bible? Well, that's the exact question we're going to tackle next time on The Explainer.
Hey, if you enjoyed this deep dive into church history and you want more of these clear, structured explainers on really complex but fascinating topics, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button. Thanks so much for watching.